Good morning and welcome to ASL's HR in 10.
At 10.
I'm Jason Perry,
And I'm Kimberly Bradshaw.
and after a few weeks of not being here, we're back to talk to you about what's going on in the wonderful world of HR and employment law. Kimberly, I kind of think we need to start with a tribunal case, don't we?
Oh, yes, Mrs. Brazel versus the Harper Trust. I think
Indeed.
this is going to ricochet around a lot from the Supreme Court. I don't know. Do you want to outline it, or should
Yeah,
I?
as a way of background, those of you that haven't been paying attention, this is a case where the individual was working as a part-time travelling music teacher for a school in Bedford. And the way in which her contract worked as a teacher, it was effectively, let's say, a term time contract or a part-year contract, as she didn't work all year. What happened a few years ago, they decided to change the way they paid annual leave. And they had a method that they used for a period of time that prorated the leave, but they changed it to using, those of you that would know, the 12.07% calculation. So they calculated the hours she'd worked, multiplied it by 12.07 and said that's the leave she's accrued. And that calculation is used really widely by many, many employers who employ part-time people. What happened when they changed it is this left her worse off. And I think, please don't quote me precisely on this, but I think for an equivalent period of leave, on the prior calculation, she was getting something like £680. And on this calculation, it dropped down to something like £450. So it was about a £230 reduction on each period of leave she took. And that was very striking, wasn't it, Kimberly?
It was. And I think what was interesting is that she went to the tribunal and they dismissed it. The appeal failed, and so she went to the Supreme Court. And I think the impact is that there might be back pay claims coming through.
The other thing that I think is really interesting is this case started off as an unlawful deduction of wages case, not as a holiday pay case. And it kind of moved as it went through the tribunal, the Employment Appeals Tribunal, and ultimately the Supreme Court. Having made it to the Supreme Court, I mean, that's it, that's final.
Yeah.
And as you say, what they ruled was that the 12.07 wasn't acceptable. The employer did try and come up with an alternative, but the court deemed it too complicated for workers to follow and calculate. And so they ruled, as I understand it, that she's entitled to 5.6 weeks.
Yes, which is unusual, and that's going to have ripples and waves, of fairly turbulent kinds, I would imagine, in some places, because in theory, then people that work part year will get as much holiday as people that work all the year.
Yes, the difficulty right now, and I'm not going to be cynical about lawyers, that would be quite unlike me, as you know. But the difficulty right now is we're in that phase where everybody is trying to interpret this ruling and figure out what it means. And there might be one or two lawyers out there, shall we say, stirring the honeypot and looking to review contracts with as many of their clients as possible. And I think it's too early to know. My first reaction is I think this is going to affect anybody that has a part-year contract. And that's predominantly going to be organisations like teaching. It might mean some kind of seasonal workers, and I'm thinking about tourism industry and so on, if people are employed for the whole year but to only work certain months. I'm not yet sure, and I'm not going to say it won't, but I'm not yet sure that it's going to fall through to 0 hours contracts or part-time workers anywhere else. And I just don't know when that's going to become clear.
Yes, and this is a landmark moment, Jason, because I am going to disagree with you to some degree. So maybe we should have bunting out for this moment, because normally
Absolutely.
I agree. I'm skeptical and think that it probably will affect 0 hours contracts. I don't get the sense that it will impact casual workers. But, we've got clients, as you know, who, let's say, are open to the public at certain times of the year. It's definitely going to affect them, but it's which of their staff is it going to affect and which is it not?
Yes.
So we do need to wait. So maybe we'll agree further down the line once we know what the interpretation is.
As I say, my key reaction on it, I feel like I'm going to do a Dad's Army Don't Panic moment. My key reaction on it is it's too early to tell. And that what we need to do is step back and calmly analyse and work out what's going on here. Because if you tried to give every worker 5.6 weeks paid leave, even if they only worked a tiny amount of hours, you get into quite a complex scenario. And quite an unfair scenario as to why people who are working more hours are not proportionately getting the right amount of holiday pay. So I can see why the ruling looks like that, but I think that it's not going to land like that, is where I'm going. This is where I think the lawyers and the courts, we're going to get interpretation of it and we're going to get test cases. And I think it will land on something that's fair, but right now, I would say any employer that's anywhere near this needs to look really, really carefully at their contracts and make sure they have minimised their exposure while we sit and wait. And I don't know what more we can do other than sit and wait, in all honesty, Kimberly.
No, and the trouble is, if we make edits now to a contract and then we need to make further edits, some staff can get very suspicious when you're literally only updating a contract because of legal requirement.
Yes.
But, a lot of employees just think, what's going on here?
I think there's another really big thing in this case, and I'm a big believer in what I'll call natural justice. And I don't think somebody who's been applying a principle that the world has thought was fair for a number of years and continues applying it is likely to come a cropper big time. I think the reason this case came out is really worth bearing in mind is they altered their system and they made their employee financially worse off. Now, they may have thought that they'd misinterpreted before, but I'd argue custom and practice, they've done it for so many years, it's hard to reverse. But changing something in situ that gave the person effectively a cut in pay, I'm not vaguely surprised they took them to the tribunal. And I think it's right that they should have won on some basis. It's on which basis they should have won. And I think I think we need to calmly wait and see where the dust settles on this one. Because anyone who's made worse off has a right to have that redressed.
Exactly, and makes me wonder how they actually dealt with the process of making the change, because in theory everyone should have been aware of what the impact would be before it happened and discussed it. So and of course none of the reporting of the courts tells us how that happened.
Yes. Well, at the moment, all we're really seeing is the Supreme Court ruling, aren't we? We haven't seen the build-up on the other two. And I have seen a couple of lawyers posting out blogs on this and so on. And right now, I understand they're all saying this could be massive. And it could.
I think it will be.
Absolutely, it could and it may. But I think with careful navigation, and as long as we keep watching this, any employer can keep themselves the right side of the fence. I think if an employer right now is reviewing it, considering it, watching where this one goes, and at the right time in the next few months, possibly as many as 18 months, starts actually moving how they do things to be an appropriate way, having reviewed it, I don't think they're going to find themselves the wrong side of the law.
No, what we have been doing with clients where we're just about to introduce contracts where they haven't had contracts or where their contracts are, not fit for purpose, if we haven't yet launched the contract, we've made some change to it to protect the client.
Yes.
But for those who are already on a contract, basically let them know. But, as you
Sit
say,
and
watch
watch.
the space.
Kimberly, I think we've achieved another first. It might be a first. This is HR in 10, and we've managed to talk for 10 minutes on a single subject. And we could have probably gone on for hours, to be fair. This is a biggie, as you say. And I think anyone who hasn't yet read this, talk to your HR advisor, talk to your lawyer, and check where you are just to watch where this one is going. It's the best advice I give anyone.
Absolutely.
But on that note, I'm going to bid you farewell. So thanks for watching, Kimberly. Lovely to be back in the seat doing HR in 10 again. And I hope to see you same time next week.